So this video is going to be a walkthrough of an article um, that will hopefully shed some light on one of the ways I'm hoping we approach the discipline paper. As you know, it's been my intention to develop skills with each of our major assignments that we will use and take with us to the next major assignment and build on those skills and build on those skills. So where we stand right now with this discipline paper, we have the experience of completing our reaction paper as well as our problem and solution paper. Um, Today, or for this lesson, what we're going to be discussing is how we might use the experience of our reaction paper, that the skills that we developed with our reaction paper to respond to this discipline paper prompt about AI in higher education. So one of the things that we're going to be doing as part of that process is engaging meaningfully with texts, with source material. So what we have here is just an article that you might find something having to do with AI in higher ed. And you might decide that it's useful for what you want to write about. Again, based on your discipline, based on the point of view you're coming from with your discipline in mind. Um, so let's just get right into it. I have a number. Let me just show you so you can know how much to settle in or not. Um, we've got here, forgive the scrolling for a minute, but we've got about, I think it was 4 pages. 3.5 pages, so not too bad. I've got quite a few comments. Most of them will go by pretty quickly, so I don't expect this to be super long. I hope it's not. Um, but just to show you, one of the reasons we're doing this is, the idea of rhetorical reading, critical reading. Um, this is a helpful skill to have in general throughout college, in life, in your jobs. Um, and I just wanted to demonstrate what it could look like. This is how I would approach an article like this. So the filters that I have in mind are um, how am I sort of reacting to this article with my discipline paper in mind, um, that I'm going to be writing about the topic or the problems posed by the topic of AI in higher education. What does my discipline have to say about that? How would I react to this article in that capacity? And starting off with just the most immediately recognizable things, aside from the visual, which we'll get to in a moment. Um, here we have the college essay is dead, and I reacted by saying, "Well, that's a bit dramatic, isn't it? Let's see, though. I don't know. Let's see what old Stephen March has to say." I think we've talked about Mr. March's writing before. I don't know if this class, perhaps it was one of the intro to comp classes, but we'll see. This is from the Atlantic, so take that for what it's worth. Those of you who are Atlantic fans. Um, but this is something to keep in mind right here. This date. If this is going to be about AI, especially its role in things like college, just let's keep this date in mind. And this is however long it was ago, 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. Um, let's see how well this article holds up because of how much can happen in a short time with regard to technology, especially something like AI. Um, this visual I thought was pretty interesting, showing a very common sort of iconic way of expressing or indicating death with a skull. We're just missing, I guess, the crossbones. But what's constituting or comprising the skull is what appears to be pages of essays, presumably college essays. So I thought that was an interesting rhetorical bit of visual rhetoric. And that's something you could totally do something with if you wanted to. We're not going to focus on that here. Um, Here's a claim. The way that this looked on the web page is a little bit different than how I'm presenting it here, but I just wanted to be able to comment on it. So nobody is prepared for how AI will transform academia. And I think that's a pretty bold claim to say that nobody is prepared. Maybe that's true. I don't know. Depending on how Mr. March is going to talk about it, we'll see. But that's a right away, we can see we have some dramatic rhetoric here. Nobody's prepared for it. Skull and, well, no crossbones, but Mr. March is painting quite a picture before we even get started. Here we have um, the beginning of this. Um, oh, and by the way, just in case I haven't mentioned it, which I think I did, um, be thinking about what we talk about here today through the lens of your discipline, of what your discipline has to say about a topic like this and about this specific article, because you're going to presumably be doing research, making decisions, making choices, whether or not you want to use certain articles and not others. Um, so just let this be an example for you. As we talk about this, as I bring up the points I'm going to bring up, see if there's any resonance with you and your discipline. And so you can take and apply similar types of thinking, similar ways of approaching articles and texts um, that would be helpful to you in whatever your specific discipline is. All right. This opening right here is just uh, Mr. March sort of setting the stage for the discussion of what we're going to have. Um, and that is that back in 22, keep in mind, here is an excerpt of a paper that was ostensibly written by um, another professor here using ChatGPT 3. Um, and this was sort of the attention grabber, I suspect, that Mr. March was going for. So this is interesting that back in 2022, this was probably very novel. This was probably very exciting or very terrifying, depending on your point of view. Um, but that was the idea here. Not a whole lot to react to in that sense, although you certainly could, especially if you wanted to write about it from a sort of fresh or contemporary point of view. But that's what was going on here in this opening. And one of the ways that March characterizes it is that it reads like filler. And then, and then he has something to say here that I thought, well, this would be an interesting place to react if you wanted to. But so do most student essays. Now, this is back in 2022 when we're just there is the beginning possibilities of having AI stand in and do our work for us. But I think what Mr. March was saying here that even without that, making a comment on student writing. So, what do you have to say about Mr. March? Is your writing amount to little more than just filler? That's a way of reacting, maybe not necessarily with your discipline. Maybe that could be part of your own opening to your essay. All right. Getting a little bit now more into the meat of the matter. Um, the reason for the opening, I suspect, or in my opinion, um, is to shed light on this idea that in terms of educators, in terms of the academy, academia, what is that? What are we to make of this? And we can update that to now in our thinking. What are we to make of the presence of AI in higher education? That's what's at stake in our discipline paper prompt. Is it a gift for students to cheat, or is it a powerful teaching assistant, a tool for creativity? That's what is before us. That's what's under consideration back in 2022 and even now. So that's the thing that's really pressing before us. Um, or do you have something different to say? Do you see it a different way? Do you react to this a different way, particularly with respect to your discipline? Um, in the example that March uses here about a student from New Zealand or wherever it was, um, is sort of justifying the use of AI and whatever the rationale is there a rationale whether this student feel like they were being unfairly penalized for um, not writing quote unquote eloquently? Whatever the rationale is there a rationale? Was this student justified? Do you hear of any other student stories where they're justified? Is there a story that could justify, um, as March wrote right here? Um, let's see, where is it here? Is it somewhere else? Confess to using AI to write their papers, justifying it as a tool like Grammarly or spell check. I have the knowledge, I have the lived experience. I'm a good student. I go to all the tutorials, I go to all the lectures, and I read everything we have to read. So you feel like if you've done all that, but I still want to do it anyway. Is that right? That's something I think you could react to. That's something perhaps you could respond to disciplinarily. I thought this moment was interesting that I can't imagine this is the case anymore, but the technicalities that folks and students in particular try to, let's say, harness or leverage or exploit in order to get around policies or rules, guidelines. This is something that you could certainly respond to or react to. By the way, I find that I'm moving through this quite briskly. You of course can pause this at any time and take your time reading it. I'm also going to be posting this to our Blackboard shell, so keep that in mind too, the article. I wondered how well this idea stands up, and the idea that it still takes a little initiative for in this case, March sort of infantilized students by calling them kids, but for a student to find a text generator. At least he was prescient enough to say, but not for long. And isn't that the case now? Here's a couple of passages in here. I thought this was an important paragraph. So basically, all we've done so far is we're just sort of getting into the discussion. Here's a bit of an attention grabber, setting the stage, more contextualizing as we talk about with our own writing projects in our class, contextualizing, contextualizing. And here we're sort of getting into what might be considered the thesis statement area. Um, I've highlighted a passage here. The essay, in particular, the undergraduate essay, has been the center of humanistic pedagogy for generations. Um, that entire tradition is about to be disrupted from the ground up. So, in terms of an effective thesis statement, we can expect the rest of Mr. March's article to follow along with this idea. That would be an effective sort of central claim, main idea. And we'll see how he does in that regard. But um, all of the places that I've pointed out where you could possibly respond or react, a lot of them were a little bit lighthearted. A lot of them were mostly intended to get you thinking. This would be something in particular that you could start to zero in on now for a reaction or a response. Um, and of course, this is sort of tethered to the date it was published. We might think about this a little differently now, but you could certainly write about that. Um, don't try not to shy away from things just because they happen to be a little bit dated and old. You can update it yourself with your thoughts and your experiences, perhaps. This green part here I have highlighted. We'll come back to that perhaps later, or maybe something in class to work with in our Blackboard module for the week. But this is also an interesting, um, it's not really March's claim. He's quoting somebody else here, but the claim that's made here, you can no longer give take-home exams or homework even on specific questions that involve combining knowledge across domains. Um, Chatbots, the OpenAI chat is frankly better than the average MBA at this point. especially that last part. If you have any reaction or any say in this, what do you as a student think about that? How do you feel about that? What might your discipline, if it's not an MBA student, I bet you could probably insert whatever discipline you want in this moment and make some evaluation, some judgment. That could be a quite a rich place for you to slow down and write about. What do we got here? Yes, here's sort of bookending that idea above. I keep scrolling like this, pardon me. I know that that's bothersome to some of you. Nobody's prepared for how AI will transform, and here it's a sort of bookended idea. Um, so tech people, humanities people, um, no one's prepared for the fallout because of this stuff. So now we can expect the rest of this article to be sort of expanding on that idea. This um, this paragraph, what it essentially does is it echoes. It's like a transition between this main idea area and really what the rest of the essay, this article is going to be about. And as we'll see in a moment, it's basically going to be March slowing down and taking issue and being critical of tech folks and humanities folks, and basically how things are all messed up because of them. The college essay has died because of them, um, and possibly a way forward. So we'll have that to look forward to. But let's see in specific what March does here. One way March goes about leading into those dynamics that I just sort of summarized is by saying the value of a humanistic education shows up in evidence of its absence. And I don't want to be too critical of Mr. March, but I'll just say that that's a pretty profound line. You could probably spend a lot of time unpacking that in an essay, in a discipline paper, perhaps. Um, what does March mean right here? Evidence of its absence. So March is foreshadowing a bit, as we'll see, another part of his claim that the humanities, with them being partially to blame, um, really haven't factored in heavily to the onward march of technology in the form of AI, and specifically AI in higher ed. Um, but first things first, let's see what Mr. March has to say about tech people. Here we have the disgraced founder of the crypto exchange. We also have the ham-fisted Elon Musk. So clearly, Mr. March isn't very doesn't see these folks very favorably. Um, Tech folks like them and folks like them, um, being sort of irresponsible and reckless going forward with technologies like AI, like generative AI. Um, for if they had a better grasp, a better understanding of the humanities, things might be different. Maybe the college essay wouldn't be dead. So again, these are this is these are places where you could slow down and respond to these things. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with March that the blame is to be placed here with these kinds of the leaders, the elites, so-called, in the tech world? Um, Here's another one. Taking on Zuckerberg um, for not understanding. I mean, here March is sort of blaming the Zuckerbergs of the world for the destruction or the annihilation of social trust. What does that say? Do you agree with that? Is that something to respond to? What would your discipline have to say about this kind of assertion or this kind of claim? Certainly a fruitful air, potentially fruitful area of discussion. In my notes here, I call it dunking on someone like in basketball because, here's old Zuckerberg or Musk or whoever. I mean, whatever you think about them, they're just sort of standing there. Here comes March, just sort of savaging them. And and right here, it's funny because it seems like March is trying to um, I don't know. I put moderate his stance perhaps a little bit by saying, yeah, it's not because they're mean-spirited or greedy, but a willful obliviousness. I mean, that's like he's trying to be nice about his criticism, I guess. There was another but an opinion, yeah, having an opinion is different from grounded understanding. So in a way, he's calling him stupid. Um, And if they were more grounded in their understanding, in other words, if they were more educated, particularly in the humanities, is what March is saying, perhaps we wouldn't be in the mess of annihilating social trust or putting us in a position to where middle, suddenly the college essay is dead. That's the point that March is getting to with paragraphs like this. He's just doing it in a very sort of colorful way. Um, Once again, though, these are moments, not necessarily in the bias, although if you happen to agree with March in his sentiments about Musk or Zuckerberg, then you can feel free to join in that regard. Try not to, the reaction or the response isn't in the agreement in the bias. So try to resist that. But really, what is the point that March is getting at by by leveling such a heavy criticism on industry leaders like this? That would be the thing to respond to here, not just you know, don't pick up a ball and start dunking on them yourself. Um, I have a long comment here. I'm gonna try not to talk about this a lot, but March says in a moment, the most direct path to catastrophe is to treat complex problems as if they're obvious to everyone. Now, hopefully, that kind of sentiment sounds a little familiar because in class, all semester, I've been encouraging you and exhorting you to please try not to proceed in your writing as if your audience just automatically knows what you're talking about or inherently agrees with you. Be clear. Um, as you talk about your problems, your solutions, your reactions, whatever you're going to talk about, however you're going to talk about it in your discipline paper. Um, this is not what March is talking about here. I'm using it as a soapbox moment, so pardon me. I want you to not treat the things that you write about as if they're obvious to everyone. They're complicated and they're complex. Um, Unfortunately, what March was doing here is he was accusing these kinds of folks, the Zuckerbergs and the Musks of the world. Um, he's accusing them of basically reducing complicated problems into things that are either obvious or at least not as complicated as they seem. And that's a result of probably, March would argue, if I was writing this paper, I would assume what March meant here, I may be wrong, um, that this error is probably a result of them not being steeped very heavily in the humanities. Again, that's something you could write about. You could argue that in part, um, especially from a disciplinary point of view, whatever your discipline happens to be. Let's see, what do we got? I thought this moment right here. again, with the dramatic rhetoric. I mean, if you were going to do a rhetorical analysis, and I encourage you to write about rhetoric in part. Don't make your discipline paper a rhetorical analysis paper. Um, but do talk about rhetoric. As technologists have ignored the humanistic questions at to their peril, so peril, that's perhaps not as dramatic as this latter part here. Humanists have greeted the technological revolutions of the past 50 years, long time, by committing this soft suit. So everybody's to blame. The technologists, the tech folks, they're too wrapped up in their own worlds to see anything any other way. And as we're going to transition now we're not going to talk about the tech folks anymore. Now we're going to talk about why the humanities are to blame, or by what March writes here. They have not, the humanities, fundamentally changed their approach in decades. In other words, whereas the tech folks perhaps move too rapidly without carefully considering things such as the humanities are the opposite. They don't change at all. They're still operating. They're still exploring meta narratives like it's 1979. Um, so March now you can start to see the landscape of what March is writing about. This issue, this problem, this topic of AI in higher ed and the specific manifestation of the college essay being dead that nobody's prepared for, it's because of moments like this. It's because the tech folks aren't educated, aren't experienced, they're not steeped in humanities, and it's because the humanities are still operating like it's 50 years ago. I mean, March has plenty more to say about it. Um, so con March says here that the academy is um, the tech world depends on things like whether they realize it or not, whether they like it or not. But language matters, voice matters, style, all these things, history, ethics, all these things matter despite or regardless of whether or not the leaders in these fields like AI are experienced at them. These things matter. And the humanities are good for that. But the humanities got to step up and say why it matters and explain how it matters. And so March is faulting the humanities here for falling short in that regard. Um, any of these moments we talk about like this, these are opportunities for you to respond from your point of view, from your disciplinary point of view. Do you agree with this? How do you see it? What does your discipline say about this? Moments like this. And here, just for a moment, March is pretty brutal sometimes. And so, I put here just talk about kicking a person while they're down, as if it's not bad enough what March is saying that, the humanities are stuck back in the past. They're not doing a very good job explaining why they're relevant. And then he says here, well, it's no wonder nobody wants to major in the humanities anymore. I don't think that's true, by the way. I mean, if he's got numbers, fine. I didn't fact check it in that regard. Um, I think plenty of people still want to be in the humanities. And I think if I could just momentarily take an aside, um, what March is doing here, whether he realizes it or not, is offering some commentary about things that are happening now. Just very recently, one of the co-founders of Anthropic, I think it is, one of the AI big companies, went on and on about how important the humanities are about to become in the AI realm. So look up that for more information about that. Um, March takes a moment here to show you how in love he is with Apple, the company Apple, because of what a good job they apparently do uh, marrying tech with the humanities, or at least trying to, compared to most other enterprises. Um, the way that March presents it here, the way he talks about it and um, offers significance, I think would be an opportunity for you to have some response or some reaction to. Keep in mind what we're doing with this walkthrough of this article is showing you, showing all of us, if we were going to write that discipline paper, and this was one of the articles that we wanted, that we were considering using, what are some of the skills we could use that we've already practiced, that we've already developed? And so what I'm showing you here are a number of places and a number of ways you could think about responding or reacting to an article like this. And the things that we're talking about here, the approaches that we're taking, the questions that we're raising, you will want to do this with every article that you encounter and you consider using in your paper. That's the idea here. That's why we're doing this walkthrough. I thought this was a very telling um, brief section here. I'll just read it here. Despite the clear value of humanistic education, its decline continues. Over the past 10 years, STEM has triumphed and the humanities have collapsed, again with the dramatic language. The number of students enrolled in computer science is now nearly the same as the number of students enrolled of all the humanities combined. Wow. That is very telling, and that is very sort of reflective of what March would probably argue is problematic with AI in higher education. That this is a symptom, that this is a consequence of things. I don't know, I don't know exactly how March would articulate that argument, but that's something for you to potentially write about as an example. All right, where are we? I don't want to spend too much time on this. We're almost done, by the way. Um, but one of the ways that March in this article discusses the topic of AI in higher education, and particularly the death of the college essay, is by calling out problems. I mean, if I don't know if you've been able to sort of get this as we move through this article, but there are lots of problems with the tech folks that March is pointing out. There are lots of problems with the humanities. So March, and most authors are going to do this when they're talking about AI in higher ed in one way or another. So they're going to get to a place, whether they explicitly state it like here in this paragraph or not, where they talk about um, problems. And one of the things that March does um, in these last couple of paragraphs here is he starts not necessarily solutions, but starts pointing toward maybe something like a way forward. I just wanted to take this moment. I thought it was interesting. Um, when March says something here about the humanities, that, it's all bad. Um, I'm tempted to read this, but just know that March is saying here that ChatGPT 3, again, I think what are we at? Five now, 5 point something. Um, so this is a few years ago, that ChatGPT is already having this tremendous impact on colleges and universities, particularly in writing, whether it's undergrads or PhD students, regardless. Um, March predicts that it's going to take a few years for people to even figure out what's going on, let alone implement any kind of solutions. Um, and then being a former professor himself throws a little bit of a bone here to other educators, saying that he feels for them. And with March, see my comment here, with March, it's difficult to know if he means this or not. Um, even though March comes across pretty brutal sometimes, he probably does have some kind of soft spot in there, I'd imagine, I hope. And so you want to take this at face value, but you're just not sure because of how critical he can be. The point I want to make with this is it matters how you come across to your audience. Is that the ethos that you want to adopt? Do you want to be the type of professor or the type of writer where your audience isn't sure how you actually are? Wouldn't you want to come across as good-willed and trustworthy and of good nature? Or do you want to come across as writing a sentence like this and having your audience cast a suspicious eye in your direction and say, I don't know if I believe him? Anyway, keep that in mind for how you come across. And now these are a couple of ways just to wrap up here, um, that March was talking about. They're going to need each other. He's saying that the humanities folks and the tech folks need to get on the same page because they're going to need each other. And that's true. Not a whole lot of elaboration in these ways forward, or perhaps solutions, to put it in the terms of one of our recent papers. We'll have another lesson on that, by the way. We're just talking about reactions and responses. I'll end here by saying this is almost like a secondary argument that March is making, and this would certainly be from your disciplinary point of view, a thing that you could respond or react to. The connection between humanism and technology will require people and institutions with a breadth of vision and a commitment to interests that transcend their fields. Before that space for collaboration can exist, both sides will have to take the most difficult leaps for highly educated people, understand that they need the other side, and admit their basic ignorance. Again, sometimes you like to end with warm and fuzzy, but not March. I highlight it again, not just because it's funny to have a chuckle at, but it's also thought-provoking, and it could be a very rich area for you to write reaction to, particularly from your discipline. These other sides, transcending your field. I mean, March in this moment is basically setting you up for something like that. So, these are the ways that I see an article like this. I hope this has been helpful, that hopefully you can take some of what we talked about here and apply it to the texts that you encounter as you begin to plan out and maybe even draft your discipline papers. Okay, see you in class.